Hello, televiewers. Good evening and welcome to Prime Hour this evening. Today we are going to go Pan-African. We are looking at leadership in Africa, asking the question as to whether leadership has been the core factor for the slow pace with which development is occurring in our very dear continent. We are discussing this with our panelists who are in the house already. Paul Solambi Valentine Ngwa is our consultant. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Leo. Good evening, Africans. Good evening, Cameroonians and viewers of Prime Hour. It's another great day again for us to deliberate very important issues concerning our continent, Africa. All Africans, stay glued to your screen because we're bringing some very vital information to you.
Okay, we're also in the company of Professor Mark Anthony. He is a Pan-Africanist. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Leo. Good evening to my fellow panelists and to the Africans out there watching at us at this hour. Wheresoever you are, I believe that this is a moment where we need to sit down and talk issues that you better push Africa ahead. And I think that this panel has been actually brought here to discuss on that, and I think you should pick up your pen.
Okay, we're also in the company of another Pan-Africanist, Sandrine Temibako is one of them. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leonard, and the panelists who are in the house tonight, and all Cameroonians who are watching this program, and all Africans continent-wide and worldwide watching this program. Good evening to you all.
Mr. Ghana Maina, founder, CEO of Develop Africa, all the way from Kampala, Uganda. Good evening and welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm not hearing.
Good evening and welcome.
I'm not hearing. Yes, thank you, Mr. Leo. Thank you to the viewers, and thank you for having me from Uganda.
How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing wonderful, Mr. Leo. How are you?
No, we are good. We also in the company of Madame Veye Tata. She is the founder and CEO of Africa Positive. Good evening and welcome, Madam.
Good evening, Mr. Leo, and greetings from Dortmund, Germany.
Okay, I may have to start the program with you. You are the founder CEO of Africa Positive. You guys are in a series of what they call Ubuntu series. What, according to you, is wrong with our continent?
It is like this. I mean, you know that since after 60 years of independence, so-called independence, African countries are still solely dependent on the West for financing their projects and for running their affairs. So we thought it's important that we decolonize. We Africans, we have to decolonize our societies. Mental decolonization. Because if we don't decolonize our societies, we'll always be passive, we'll always be dependent, and we'll always be hoping that the West will come and develop Africa. And that's never going to happen. Because only Africans can develop Africa. And that's the essence of the Ubuntu series, to sensitize the people about these issues.
Yeah, what are those factors that shows that the West will never develop us? They give us aid, they give us assistance, we are into many cooperations, partnerships with them.
Have you ever heard of any country that developed through developmental aid? No country on the earth has ever developed through developmental aid. How come we Africans think that our African countries are different from any other country in the world? Any country can only develop from the efforts of its citizens, and Africa has a lot of resources that can be used to develop the African continent. But instead, we are exporting everything out of the continent without production, and then we are expecting the West to be giving us aid. So we will always stay beggars, and beggars can never develop themselves.
Okay, beggars can never develop themselves. Apostle Ambe Valentine Ngwa, what Madame Veye Tata is saying is what they are doing in what they call Africa Positive. Our leaders ignorant of what she is saying. And if they know, why would we still be beggars in the 21st century?
Our leaders are not, I repeat, they are not ignorant or innocent of what is happening in this continent. We have leaders whose hearts are not courageous enough to do what they have as vision for their continent. There is a portion of the Bible that says in Proverbs chapter 22 verse 7, it says the rich rule over the poor and the borrower is a slave to the lender. You see, slave trade has evolved from one stage to another. It has not been abolished. They have shifted from physical slavery to mental slavery. And that is a kind of slavery which is more dangerous. 2 Corinthians 4:4 says, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the people. A blind mind is more dangerous than a blind eye. One of the things we fail to understand in this continent is that the advanced slavery which has been introduced to us is not carrying us to Europe to go and work in plantations anymore. It's keeping us permanently in a position where we'll constantly be borrowing from the world, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. And as long as Africa continues to borrow from the West, it maintains us as slaves forever. Maybe you have not come across that scripture, Proverbs 22 verse 7. A borrower is a slave to the lender. How does the African leadership or leaders come into play with the suffering of the masses? It is because these leaders are greedy. These leaders are self-centered. These leaders are egoistic. These leaders are very, very myopic. They go to power not seeing politics as a vocation to serve the people. They go there as a means to satisfy themselves. Like we said yesterday, genuine leaders are those who lay down their lives for others to live. As a matter of fact, being a leader, you are a sacrifice for the well-being of others. A few African leaders have proven to us that we cannot lay every blame to the colonial masters that came to Africa. Before we continue, many other continents were colonized. There was the Arab uprising that kicked out the colonial master. The Indians were colonized. South America was colonized. Brazil was colonized by the Portuguese. But now Brazil is rising to become a world power. Are you people telling us that India, that was colonized by Britain, and Mahatma Gandhi picked a document in 1946 signed by the nations of the world after the United Nations and said every country has its sovereignty, and Mahatma Gandhi began a civil disobedience riot, non-violence, and because of that he pressed charges until India was given independence. India came from the root of the British. Rwanda we see today in Africa, let me not quote out of Africa because we are quote out of Africa, they will say it is because they are in South America, because they are in Asia. Rwanda came from the Belgians in 1962, gave them independence. We all know what Rwanda has gone through in terms of crisis and the civil war. Rwanda has bounced back. It was a colonized economy, but it is rising every day without even having the resources some economies have. Ghana was colonized by the British. Ghana is rising up to the extent where there was, in the time of John Agbekum Kufuor, a Ghana city was equivalent to the dollars. Ghana is the only country America has accepted to sign bilateral deals with, where things can be exported from America to Ghana, and likewise from Ghana to America. America does not only ship into Ghana, Ghana equally ships into America. Is Ghana from space? Recently, God raised a man that gave us an understanding that we must not live by borrowing loans from out of the country. John Joseph Pombe Magufuli of Tanzania. I'm talking about leaders in Africa. We'll talk about the post-colonial and the pre-colonial leadership. Then we'll talk about why people are greedy in Africa and we are trying to lay blames on other people. Okay. Magufuli came, let me learn, Mr. Leo, to give us the impression that you mustn't borrow to succeed. And he took the international economy to a middle income economy with a lot of infrastructures and other investment. Before he left, he built a refinery to process gold in Tanzania, which now processes gold as a finished product to be kept in Fort Knox in Switzerland, in Bouillons. Goals leave Africa for 40 million. And they are kept in the Fort Knox in Switzerland. It pays at least 50 million a month. Multiply it times 12 months is 600 million for 40 million gold, because we don't know how to process goals in Africa. We'll come back to other issues to make us understand that Africa are the cankerworm that is eating their own herbs. Okay,
I'll move over to Uganda. Mr. Ghana Maina, founder, CEO, Develop Africa. Madame Villiers raised the issue of loans. Apostle Ambe also touched on it. Is it possible for Africa to survive without loans? And if it is possible, why are our leaders not going the way of reducing or avoiding loans as to in their bid to develop their respective nations? Hello, Mr. Gaina.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Leo. Can you hear me, right?
Yes, we're getting you.
Let me first talk about the leadership before talking about the borrowing.
Okay.
We all know that every domain, whatever, if you want to be a journalist, there is school for it. If you want to be a businessman, there is school for business. If you want to be a doctor, there is a medicine school. But we never see a leadership school where those our leaders come from. That is the mistake number one. But now, my question is, who are we calling leaders first in Africa? Because we have two categories of people. We have just a politician who want to make a living. They don't have nothing to offer. And we have people who want to work for their people, for their community. Who are we talking to first? Because 90% what we have in Africa is just politician. A politician is just, he's selling the air, he's selling lies to survive. He don't have nothing to offer you. Number one. Now, when we talk about leadership, we need to understand some steps, how we can judge these people if he's a leader or not. How many leaders do you know in Africa, especially on that our French system colony, that they can stand to say that if this area has failed because our leadership will fail? Do you know one? Let's say our leaders stand today to say that the problem what's happening in the Anglophone region is Cameroon. We are responsible. They never take responsibility. Leadership is to become a responsible. If anything happens on the jurisdiction you are leading, you stand for it. Because you can't take the credit without taking the blame. How many leaders do you know have done that? Number one. And number two, when we talk about the leadership, the people we call our leaders, how many of them that you can sit on the table, they can give you the vision for the 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years? Few of them. When you come down about borrowing, we are neighbored here with Tanzania, John Pombe Magufuli. The 6 years he was in power, the country has not borrowed one penny from the international community. They never take a grant even for 1 penny. They refuse to take bet. What you have realized in 6 years, the past predecessor of 50 years have never realized what he meant with the country money, with the taxes, how you organize the country, how he stop corruption. So mean that if a country like Tanzania can do well, Cameroon can do better than that. Chad can do better than that. Central African Republic can do better than that. Congo, Brazzaville can do better than that. Senegal can do better. Ivory Coast, we can do better than them. The issue is, do we have leaders who are ready to stand? Because you can be a politician, but you are not a leader. How many people, Mr. Leo, you know in any countries, either in Cameroon, in Chad, just they come, they say that we do political party, we are against this government. They talk a lot of things. At the end of the day, when they call them for the meeting, they give him small envelope. Tomorrow he closes his mouth. So maybe he was not a leader. He was just selling air. He was just hungry and he want to eat. Now, the situation we find ourselves in Africa here, we embrace the democracy so faster that we don't even know how it works.
That's right.
Yeah. Do you think that even we need democracy in election in Africa? I don't think so. Why UAE is the best country on earth? Did they have political parties? No. Did they have democracy? No. But they are one of number one, the happiest country on earth. Why? So leadership is not about talking politics, about political parties. Leadership is about what you want for your people. What do you want to do for your community?
Okay.
What can you change? How can you change the people's lives?
Okay.
That's leadership.
Okay, that's leadership.
I'm giving an example. A country like Cameroon don't need to borrow nothing because we have everything in Cameroon. We have the resources, yes.
Okay. Professor Mark Anthony, we're talking about leadership. Where is the problem coming from? Is it the fact that people are not trained to be leaders, or the fact that leaders themselves are ignorant, or the fact that their hands are tied?
Leadership training is not actually the problem, because it is true that people are born with abilities, but they need to actually train their leadership abilities to have the skills. But to say that there is no particular school where leaders are trained is not what actually makes the difference. As long as somebody goes to school to be formed in accounting, he's been trained in that direction. If somebody goes to school to do political sciences, he's been trained in that direction. What happens at the end of the day is it should now be your ability to identify opportunities and be able to objectively channel solutions towards that particular problem that you identify. That makes you a leader, because I'll tell you that true leadership is not known when there are no problems. True leadership is identified when there are problems. And that is why I will say the problem we have in Africa, most of the times we want to tend to blame it on the Westerners, to blame it on colonization. Colonization was something that actually affected Africa, and I will be sincere in telling you that it affected right to the core, right deep into our core. It affected the way we think. But should we now blame the failures that we have in our community entirely on that? No. Reason why I say so is because, like Apostle Ambe actually cited, there are individuals in this same Africa. If you go back, just remember some few years back in 1980s, young Sankara, Thomas Sankara, rose up and manned a nation, proved beyond doubt that you can stay in Africa and make Africa great. It is true, through his own right-hand man, he was killed. If you go back to Tanzania, just of recent, in our own days, John Pombe Magufuli actually showed us that there is a possibility to lead your nation to success without being blamed by the people, though actually you can never lead without being blamed, because there are times that people point fingers for no good reason. So if you look at it, if you can count some few persons who had been able to do it in Africa, who had lifted up the bar, who created some influence, caused the nation to advance, then it means that there is a possibility for every other leader to do so. So we will also look at it and say that greed, the greed of those leading us, has been the problem. I'll cite to you that when you go to Dubai, in the 1960s, Dubai was completely a desert. But if you go to Dubai today, a land that has little or no natural resource, it just discovered its oil not long ago. But look at it, that nation is well established, well developed, where today most Africans are running to Dubai to make a living. When we have more resources than they'll ever have, we have the human resources and the natural resources more than they'll ever have. So the question is, what has created that difference in Dubai? You go to Singapore, you see the same thing. In the 1960s, Singapore was a complete beggarly nation. But because of leadership of individuals, those nations we just cited here had been lifted and raised to a position of power. And today, Mr. Leo, if you enter Singapore, Singapore stands as one of the best nations in the world. And Dubai, if you go there, it is going to be the next, in fact, very soon, it is going to stand out and be one of the touristic centers in the world because of development. That's leadership.
Andrew Atemebako, where would you situate the African leadership problem today?
Mr. Leo, the thing is that the Africans are, like the other panelists was trying to say, that we have not really understood what democracy is, and we have quickly embraced democracy without understanding really what democracy is. Like when I used to say that a lot of Africans do not know the essence of democracy, which was instituted in America in the 1800s. You see, one of the things that has crippled the African leaders are very few things which was instituted way back in when they were forming up a structure, a united front to take over Africa from 1884 to 1885, 1923, 1929, 1944, and 1945 at the emerge of the United Nations. You see, the IMF, as a matter of fact, has been one of the greatest problems Africa has ever suffered, because the IMF, it's how will I put it, it's a commercial bank, which by analysis shows that from 1959 till up to the present date, all loans and aids that have ever come from the IMF and the World Bank for developing nation has never developed any country. That's what we call crisis development, where you give the people the impression that you are out to help them, but when yet you do not believe that in your own hearts. So the Africa was put in a dependency position where Africa was made to loan what belongs to Africa. They had built an empire way back in the 1800s when George Washington, how will I put it, instituted democracy in America for one reason. That was to give the people a distraction of a well-built structural legacy which they have exploited from the slaves for so many generations. And after they had built that empire, they now form what I call a team which plays to win for its own interest, both national and its foreign interest. They brought in now democracy to protect that interest and make America feel part of that exploit which they have achieved. And that was the essence of democracy. And that is why I said that democracy, which we have seen clearly from the level of the United Nations, from the level of the United States, it's the minority that rules the majority. And that explains the fact that that explains the reason why Africa has not been given veto power at the level of the United Nations, because Africa has been kept in that position intentionally by all this emergence of all those institutions, right up to the UNESCO, which was opened in 1944. All these things was perpetually to keep Africa where it is. So when they gave African what I call the reborn of the West in Africa in the 1960s as the independent, this was to give the Africans a possibility whereby they feel that they can now have a collaboration with their Caucasian brothers in developing Africa, which was a trap. Africa, as a matter of fact, stands to be the richest, not only the richest, but it is the richest continent in the world and has enough to bless and feed the whole world. And they understand that if they are going to stay up, because you can never have two masters at the helm of the power, you can only have one. So either Africa stays down and they stay up, or Africa goes up and they stay down. So this has been the principle whereby our leaders were subjected to loans way back from the very beginning. Another definition of poverty is when a man spends more than what he's able to earn. Africa spends more than what it earns, and that is a birth of corruption, and that is another definition of poverty, because it is the inability for you to develop what you have. And this is a state in which we have been kept, whereby We see that today the West earns more and Africa spends more. How do you explain the fact whereby all the resources are coming from Africa? How many multinational companies do we have in Africa that are exploiting the resources of the African at the expense of the future and destiny of the African people? Okay. So we are saying that if Africa is going to move forward, Africa will need either to seek and fight for its sovereignty, to gain equal membership at the level of the United Nations, or let Africa learn to live together with their Caucasian brothers by living apart. Okay. Because it's not going to work this way by the trend in which we are following. Okay,
we are going to follow this short video done by Africa Positive. It is titled Ubuntu series, where they are depicting why Africa is where it is today.
You don't even look for me.
I know, I'm guilty. I've been busy with work and trying to get my passport renewed. It's been over 7 months now. The queue and all, Charlie. Stressful.
I'm sure if he had paid someone, he would have had it by now.
Not that easy. I have bills to pay.
But that's wrong, you know. Getting a passport should not have to be this hectic.
I'm sure the passport office is just not being properly resourced.
Oh, if so, how come when you pay someone, you get it faster? I say it's just corruption and sheer wickedness by those in charge.
Hey, fellas.
Hey, Mamadou.
Hey, my guy. How was Freiburg?
Cool, my brother. How have you been?
Can't complain much, but all good.
And my ladies, looking as good as ever. Come on, let's take a seat.
Let me know when you're ready, and I'll take your orders, please.
I will go with some water for now.
Me too. I'm too balled up to go for anything solid right now.
Why? What's the problem?
He has issues with service delivery in this country.
Not just that, bro. Almost everything doesn't work around here. Even if it does, some of us are cut off due to prohibitive costs or bureaucracy. From food, medicine, education to basic services. It's a killer, Charlie.
Do you remember Yola, my friend in college, whose father is a deputy minister?
Of course, who doesn't know her? She comes with bodyguards and a driver to school.
Well, her father is very sick, and I heard he has been transported to Switzerland for treatment.
Privileges of the rich. How nice it is to be rich in this country. I will do whatever necessary to become rich one day. I don't care what.
Well, I'll do the same if I was super rich. Don't you want to be rich someday?
Don't get me wrong, Mamadou. I'm not against being rich. Just that the people we put in charge to use our taxes and resources to provide necessary infrastructure and decent living conditions are busy enriching themselves with those same resources while not delivering on their mandates. It is the responsibility of governments to invest enough resources in our healthcare sector, education, clean water, electricity, and other areas of common good. But sadly, they aren't doing their job. Most local politicians lack empathy, love, and respect for their own citizens. Why do they think they deserve better treatment? Exactly my point. We need to be careful the kind of people we elect to certain position of authority. Many seem qualified, but they are not.
I heard Mr. John, the guy working at the local government hospital, bribed himself into medical school back in the day. He had very bad grades. A mystery how he is now a medical doctor. Rumors say it was all facilitated by his uncle, who is the current health minister.
Seriously? No wonder some of the doctors working in the general hospitals prefer to get their treatment from private clinics or travel abroad because they know how incompetent some of their colleagues are.
But I don't think it can be all that bad as you make it seem.
Unfortunately, it is, bro. You just have to fall sick or be in a position of need. Then you have all these issues hitting you.
You know, this country is an enigma. Competence, education, qualification, or experience does not seem to matter. What matters is who who your family is, or whom you know. This seems to be the criteria for employment.
Many successful countries lay emphasis on hiring the best talented and experienced people for their institutions and enterprises.
Not here, oh, Mamadou. Greed and selfishness dictates who gets what position around here. Sorry to seem all jaded, but that's the reality.
No wonder many African countries are lagging behind with developmental issues. Have you ever seen anyone willing to be driven by a blind person? When one needs a house built, doesn't one engage the services of the best architects for the fact that the house needs to be good and solid?
Sure, some, if not all of these politicians, live in very well-built and guarded houses. How come they don't demand the same structural quality when awarding contracts for public construction works, or employ competent doctors or qualified teachers to serve the people? It takes the common rain to expose how bad many of the government project has been executed.
Sometimes I blame us all. We know the right thing to do, but deliberately refuse due to greed and selfishness. The way forward for our countries is for each and every one of us to accept and value competent workers in all our institutions.
I agree.
Knowledge and talent should be the core criteria for our decisions, not emotions, ethnicity, and family ties.
Examine the efficiency of the diverse workforce of most multinational companies.
The case of some African politicians is different, too. They think they are so smart. They send their children to good quality schools and universities abroad and enjoy good quality healthcare there, but refuse to enable and commission such facilities back home.
But that is punishing your own people and being wicked to them. Do we not deserve the same health care as the politician and their immediate families? If the Europeans were also behaving like some African politicians, where will the so-called African elites be traveling to for treatment?
Have you ever heard that? The German Chancellor left her country to get treatment in another country.
Should be made to resign.
I think I have a solution. Europe should start refusing visas for politicians traveling for medical reasons from Africa. That will force them to invest in infrastructure and in quality services in their own countries.
Kojo, that is somehow being naive. You think the Europeans don't want to earn more money from this medical tourism? See, every Western country is vying for a share of this market.
Those are capitalist societies, and the onus is on us to improve our systems and make Africa our own paradise.
Please, I'll have to leave you people alone. I have an appointment at the university.
Let us meet next time and look for solution how to make our countries.
Okay, that is what they call an Ubuntu series done by Africa Positive. Madame Veye Tata is founder CEO of that project. I will get back to you, Madame Veye. What is it that you are wanting Africans to know? That we have poor service delivery, lots of corruption, so much neglect for that which is supposed to cater for the needs of the common man?
Well, I think the first thing that I would like to mention is, you know, when we are complaining about all the issues, all the challenges we have in our society, we forget to understand that those people who are leading Africa today, those politicians, they are a mirror of our society. So that means if we in our society, if we have low moral values, if we don't have empathy for each other, if we don't sacrifice on individual levels, how do we expect that when people become our politicians, that they are going to behave differently from us? You know, so the message actually that Ubuntu is bringing forward is each and every one of us has a responsibility to change in the society. Each person on his own level, you know, but it's very important that we have to have certain values in our society and moral that we have to respect. Because if not so, it will be difficult, you know, to bring about tangible change that is going to impact everybody in the society.
Okay, Apostle Ambi Valentine, where I get her point to see that if we have incompetent people in our communities, We have very irresponsible persons in our quarters and in our classrooms, our job sites. Definitely the leadership that is going to be served to us is emanating from our societies.
Mr. Leo, the problem we have to be asking is the persons who are in leadership. Where do they get the chunks of money that they take to Europe to go and cater for their health? If they say Africa is poor, the leader's hands are tight. A leader's hand is not tight to build houses in America. A leader's hands are not tight to build his personal hospital in Germany.
To send the children to school.
To send the children to very expensive schools. A leader's hand is not tight when the daughter of a president is paying $13,000 as taxi fare in another country. A leader's hand is not tight when they buy the most expensive cars. A leader's hand is not tight when they dress the most expensive suits on earth. When they go spend weeks and months in hotels abroad. Their hands are not tight. A leader's hand is not tight when in the nation where we live, most of the property belongs to them. How do we explain that a leader's hand is tight in developing the community? A leader's hand is not tight when ministers steal billions of dollars, embezzle them, their hands are not tight. Are you telling us that colonial masters came to Africa here, they are the ones who are telling the leaders to steal? Are you telling us that the colonial masters that came to Africa, they are the ones that told the leaders not to build good hospitals and fly abroad to go and take treatment there? Are you telling us that the colonial master that told our leaders not to construct good roads that they themselves will run their vehicles on it? Are you the one telling us that the leaders will buy expensive cars for themselves and protect themselves at the expense of the people? What is this 1 million man question about colonial master, colonial master, colonial master? Let us accept or agree that the colonial master has taken 75% of our resources. The balance 25%, a wise man said, what you have in your hand, if you can think well, it is enough. What you have in your hand, if you can think well, it is enough. I'm wondering if we have to have in our hands the money. How do you explain that Namibia has a GDP of $12.37 billion? It's a middle income economy. While Cameroon has a GDP of $39.01 billion. Yet we are not a middle income economy. Look at the gap. The gross domestic product of Namibia, which is a country that gained independence on the 21st of March 1990 from South Africa. This country has a gross domestic product, of $12.37 billion. Yet it is a middle income economy. While Cameroon, our nation, has $39.01 billion as GDP, yet we have not attained. If a country's economy is calculated based on the GDP, and it shows that a country with a lesser GDP supposed not to be at a middle income economy, while that of a higher GDP is low, it is to tell you that the money is in the system, but it is in the hand of very few individuals. You see prime ministers in Europe and other countries going to work on bike, but the convoy of a mayor, not minister. Before we talk about minister and talk about president or prime minister, the convoy of a mayor, the convoy of a DO or an SDO in our community is money that can be used to construct at least 2 roads. Roads we don't have, but we have convoy that escort men to places. What are we talking about? If we say we are not going to blame the leaders of Africa for mismanaging the resources, we are hanging our weaknesses and our irresponsibility upon the colonial masters. The colonial masters themselves, they make a mockery of us because even the little they gave us, we have not been able to manage it. Why would the Chinese come to Africa and say Uhuru Kenyatta is an idiot? A Chinese man sits in Kenya, in Nairobi, and insults Kenyans, saying that you people are idiots. That's how we see you. Even Kenyatta is an idiot. I only came here because I needed money. Right in Kenya. It is to tell you that they have sat down, look at the way we operate, and realize that we are operating like poor of a very low mental capacity. That is to tell us that we have to wake up. Let us stop the blame game of colonial master here, colonial master. India is coming up forcefully, and it was colonized like any other country. It's coming up. Brazil is coming up. It was colonized by the same Portuguese that colonized Mozambique. that colonized Angola, that colonized Guinea-Bissau, that colonized Cape Verde. It's the same Portuguese that colonized Brazil, colonized Argentina. But those countries are rising and rising. I want us to talk only within Africa, because if you call Asia, they will say because it's out of Africa, or you call South America. I'm talking Africa here. Belgians colonized Rwanda. Why is Rwanda rising?
Leo.
Okay, come in.
Leo, can I chip in a bit with something?
Okay,
Leo,
come in.
Leo, I think he's taking something. Sorry. Sorry, I have to chip in a bit. The essence of Ubuntu is to give the responsibility of development in the hands of Africa. We are not there. Ubuntu is there to say Africans have to take their responsibilities in their hand. Nobody is saying that the colonial masters are fault. Ubuntu is there to sensitize Africans that we are responsible.
Madam, he's just raising a point. He's not coming against what you said. No, he's rather buttressing what you are saying.
I am supporting what you are saying, madam.
Yeah, I don't believe. Okay, good. You know, because I think that's the essence. I mean, we have to see Africans are obstacles to their development.
That is what he's saying.
Leaders, but Africans in general are obstacles to develop.
That is what he's saying.
That's what I'm saying, madam.
Yeah.
Okay.
You didn't get me very well. Because a few Africans have decided to lay blames on the colonial master. The song we have in Africa is that colonialism is the author and the trouble for our nations and our continent. But the truth is, colonial era has passed. What are we doing in this era as leaders of this time? What are we Africans doing in this post-colonial period? The education they gave us, we have discovered all the tricks that were in that education. We have preached against it and proffer practical ideas to counter the ideas that were instilled in our system as educational pattern. We have now come also to on television program to sensitize Africans concerning, and there are videos all over circulating the world. African organizations and Pan-African movements are all over the place sensitizing Africans. Why is it that Africans are not growing at the pace of the sensitization? It is because we have a group of self-centered, egocentric, greedy, and very hard-hearted leaders who, when given the opportunity to serve their community, they see it as a means to energize and empower themselves at the expense of the masses. Okay. So let us wake up as Africans and face the reality.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Liu and guest members. I'm Dr. Abang Luis, writing from Yaoundé. I'm so grateful for this program. How I wish our African leaders are watching and change. Okay, let African leaders take examples from Tanzania, the late president. Good evening, Mr. Liu. We were taught in school that civilization started in Africa. We are not developed because of these leaders. I am happy some few countries are proving that we can have good leaders. Thanks, Mr. Nzipita, writing from Boya. Good evening to you, Mr. Nzipita. Good evening, Mr. Liu. My greetings to you and in the house. Please, Mr. Liu, please have patience to read my report. Please, I really wish to lay a complaint, sir, about the intermediate level exam GCE. Two subjects were mismanaged that yesterday, citizenship education and building construction drawing, which some students did not finally do their drawing, while some came few minutes to the end, while some went in for citizenship education with well-known questions. Course GTHS Bamenda was drawing, while GTHS and Quen were writing citizenship education. While those were not doing citizenship went out to go and prepare their drawing, not knowing GTHS Bamenda changed the subjects. But according to GCE timetable, citizenship was to start first before drawing, as we wrote paper 1 in the morning period. But paper 2 for the both subjects was not correct, because students shared and received the questions through WhatsApp, which was terrible, and we closed at 7:40 p.m. while some closed at 8 with the poor conditions in the night. It was really terrible, Mr. Liu. I'm one of the candidates from GTHS Bamenda. Okay, we sorry for that. Good evening, Mr. Liu. All of you should join me and pray for Pastor Ambe to be the president of this country. Okay, Pastor Ambe is not a politician. Apostle Ambe, not Pastor Ambe. They even call him senior apostle back now. I don't know where that title is coming from. Good evening, sir. Thank you for speaking so well of Ghana, my country. But many things have really changed for the worst. For the past 4.5 years, the Ghana government has borrowed money than all the previous governments since 1957. Yet we have nothing to show for it. Okay, it comes back to the leadership we are talking about here. Esther, writing from Yaoundé, says, hi, Mr. Leo, and to everyone in the house. Thanks for the educative program. Say happy born day to Prof. Mark. I forgot yesterday, H with Grace. Okay, good evening to you. Prof has received your greetings. Good evening, Mr. Leo and crew. The major African problem is lack of economic independence. Unfortunately, our leaders are not courageous enough to look at the European in the eye and tell them the truth. Dr. Arikana Chihombori questioned France's policy of collecting 15% of our finance, and the result was her dismissal. Yet African leaders couldn't support her in the move. We need economic independence to prosper. Derek Wala is writing from Chang. Hi, Mr. Leo. Please tell your man to stop talking about Article 9 of the Constitution if it's nice. Okay, I don't know what article you are talking about, but let me move over to Uganda. Mr. Ghana Maina, founder CEO of Develop Africa. When you followed the piece that was put together by Africa Positive, they'll tell you that service delivery in Africa is too poor. They also raised the issue where African leaders would prefer to go get medical attention out of the continent. Should we be at this stage at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Leo. We're always talking about the leadership again. And sometimes we are even forgotten that we are demanding something that is not there. Like you want to drink the milk, but you went to a dog. We are getting milk only from a cow. You can't get the milk from the dog. And even you get it, you cannot be satisfied enough. We know that sometimes our leaders, they don't have nothing to offer. Or they don't even have it. You can't ask something that, you cannot ask me something that I don't have, Mr. Leo. When we talk about now service deliveries, is there any planning we as a people or put on the ground that those leaders can implement? Is the leaders we have already are they even next to the community to listen? How many leaders we know in Africa that they can go to their community freely without fear, sit down with this community, discuss with them to listen what is the basic needs that they can fight for, at least to implement the needs? Few of them. We are congratulating Magufuli. We are seeing Magufuli drive his car going to any remote area of the country and sit down, talk with people, even drink tea, ask them. He can even call the woman on the street to ask her how things going. Our leaders have never done that. If you are not even closer to your community, how do you know their problem? All our leaders, they live in the capital. They are even going to their home village only the time for elections. For election, right? They are going to give them rice and bread, sardine lights, and come back, but they don't even know the real problem. So leadership is not about being on the power. Leadership is about be with people and make sure that you give him the basic services we need. At the end of the day, when we find out a layman, real population, they don't ask you too much. They ask you just the basic services that education, school, healthcare, and all those things that they affordable things that at least to make their life better. But meanwhile, let us come back, we now who in the platform. We need to understand that criticism and blame is not wisdom. We will do that for the next 50 years, there will be no solution. We need to stand by ourselves first. We need to start to make sure that we are doing something on the ground to show people that this is what I'm doing. What have you realized first to show that in my capacity, this is what I've done and I want people to join me. Anytime when I'm discussing with many people, you tell them, any country you go, when you see their leaders, believe me, he is the typical photocopy of the population. Either we like it or not, we will complain, we will argue in that. When you come to Cameroon, the president of Cameroon is a typical leader of Cameroonian. That is who we are.
That's right.
Of course, God will never give you somebody who's not for you. If we see someone is in the power, he stay with you, this is who you are. Maybe we are lying to ourselves, we are masking a lot of things, but the reality, God will never mask anything. This is your leader. Even the era of before the colonization, we were having the kingdom. When you go to those kingdoms, when you see their leaders, you know, this is the kind of population, because the integrity of the leader showed how the integrity of the people. But did we agree on that first? We as a people. If we don't agree, if we have integrity, we can't get these people as our leaders. So this is who we are.
Okay.
Man cannot give you what he don't have, Mr. Leo.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I will still raise this issue. In the piece that was presented, somebody is complaining that to get a simple passport, you need to look for somebody to pay so that they can facilitate the situation. I'm sure that is what obtains also in Cameroon, even for identity cards. We have a very poor service delivery. If you go to an office for a public servant who is recruited by the state to serve the people, majority or to some extent they would want you to rub to oil their lips so that they can fast track whatever service you require from them.
Yeah, Mr. Liu, that just goes to actually confirm what Mr. Ghana was saying there. At times we want to point fingers at the president, not knowing that there in the crowd, almost everybody is corrupt. To an extent where Africans already feel like, okay, if I need a service, I need to pay for it fast. I need a fast service, an express service. And they don't find any reason why they should complain against it. You are driving on the streets of a city, or maybe crossing from one region to the next. The purpose for which those policemen are there is actually to make sure that they see into it that you are up to date. But most of the times, those cars are not checked. The interest is the 500 francs, so the money that they can collect. That goes to tell you how the common man who is down there is already corrupt to an extent where if you give that same person the opportunity to sit in that leadership position, in quotes that we are talking about, you have the same results. So we have an Africa which is practically corrupt from top to bottom, or let me say from bottom to top, because all those leaders are coming from the crowd. And so there is need for not only civil societies, not only Pan-African organizations to keep on with the education, but there is need for us to go back to actually re-educate Africans on what it means to be an African.
Servant leadership.
Servant leadership. We have lost what it means to be an African, to an extent where somebody feels like, okay, if you are my brother, I can't do anything for you for free. But that is not what it used to be. There was what we call the convivial way of living before, where if you come into the community and the people welcome you, you don't have money, you don't have food to eat, they give you food, they give you somewhere to even build a house and farm. That was their way. But look at it, where has that particular ingredient, that spice that makes this community working together, where has it gone to? Are we going to say it is just colonialism? I am sure that in one way or the other, colonialism did not get into the core of African people. Some of us were carried to Europe and to America as slaves. Those people could be easily transformed because they were imposed a lifestyle. Those of us who remain home Do we still have that particular ingredient? You see, it's lacking because most of us, we want to copy the white man's way of living. And as a result of that, we keep corrupting everything. And we will say, leaders has done that, leaders have done that, leaders have done that. But we are supposed to be blamed equally for what is happening in our community. Somebody might not like what I'm saying, but the truth is that if you look at things critically, we are corrupt to the core. And we need to get, each one of us must get to the place where we sit down and identify that weakness within us. We build ourselves. Mr. Leo, the thing that Africans need the most right now as I'm talking is self-realization. For them to be able to get that identity as Africans, they must get to understand this. And like I said, there is need for the African central Afrocentric education, which teaches Africans the values of an African and permits them to see themselves as Africans. Because apart from that, we keep on thinking we are Europeans or American, and we want to live a life that is not us. So I am of the fact that Africans, if we have to solve this problem of leadership tomorrow at the top, we have to go back to re-educate Africans on the core values of what an African should be. And when that happens, you will see Africans who will emerge with that capability to transform their communities for their communities, because they will not be working for themselves.
Yeah, Andrew Natemebako, we're talking about the snail peace at which development is being driven in the African continent. I want you to look at it from the solidarity perspective. We have the AU and we have other sub-regions. We hardly see them come together to provide solutions to the African problems. We see African heads of state move to China for what is commonly called the Africa-China Summit. We see all of them move to Russia for something similar. They recently were in France where they met with President Macron. Do we really need to depend on these people? Can Africa as a unit, as a continent, not fathom solutions to its problems?
Mr. Liu, the issues of Africa and leadership, government to its population has been a very complex one. But in all my analysis I've been making on the African people and on media platforms, social media, is to be able to provide very practical solutions on how Africans can emerge as a people. And we must also understand what really is the cause and what are really the blames, the ills in our society at the level of our government. The Africans themselves will need to come to understand this, because you see, we have been blaming, which is okay, not only at the level of the West, not only at the level of our governments, our administration, our leaders, but at my level and my best analysis I have made, I have crossed past the level of the West and our governments. We are at the level of what can Africans do for Africans to build Africa for Africans, and that is where we need to understand and know that we cannot depend on our governments. You see, I've had a lot of people as well who have made very good analysis on few African countries that are emerging. But if you come to understand the intricacy and the secret behind their emergence, it will shock a lot of Africans that a lot of strings and conditions have been put in place for us to, in such a way that the audience does not see what is taking place behind the scene. An example of recent would be Rwanda. A lot of us are hailing Rwanda today of entering into a middle income class country, but in my analysis as a Pan-Africanist, I will tell you that Rwanda has not done its full capacity in which Rwanda was supposed to do, and Rwanda is still having a lot of strings attached at the level not only of its former colonial master Belgium, at the level of France. So you come to realize that the condition in which they have placed Africa at this junction where we are, it's very difficult for us to expect change coming from the side of our government, solidarity come from the side of our government, fast development coming from the side of our government, because it is impossible when you have indebted yourself for several decades, whereby you are at the mercy of your Caucasian partners.
Yeah, but it is often said that better late than never. What are you saying? Is it because we are so indebted that we cannot get back to the drawing board to see how to spring forth?
The drawing board is not going to come at the level of our leadership and the unity. They have failed to unite themselves, because if you look at the way the international community is treating Africa, it's like handling each African country as a personal case study and not as a bloc or as a continent. As far as the level of the AU that we expected the AU to have been a union of Africa seeking the interests of all African member states, that has not been the case. And in talking about even the AU, like I have been saying, the AU really does not derive from the spirit of Africanism, does not derive from the spirit of the African people themselves. The AU emerged in 2002 after the bombing of the World Trade Center in 2001, for the interest of the United Nations and the EU, for the AU to establish itself in Africa as a spy. And that is why you can realize that the structure of the AU in Addis Ababa was built by the Chinese as a free gift of $200 million, a monumental secret how will I call it, cultural building that was supposed to hold the effigies and idols. Secrecy, the embodiment of the identity of the African people. It was supposed to be a museum, a site where Africans can go there and see what Africa is. But that was built by Chinese, just like a man who gets married and calls another man to come and dress his wife. So I am saying that the AU does not represent Africa as the OAU. So let us be clear about that. So Africa is at a level where, what explains the fact that the destiny of Libya is being decided today at the level of Berlin. Ethiopia is decided by Ireland, United Kingdom, and United States. Cameroon, Chad at the level of France. So they have made it in such a way that they have handling Africa independently in such a... Sudan has been in a condition for 3 decades where it received a sanction at the level of the United States, and no African member state, including the AU, could rescue Sudan from that sanction that America put Sudan. That is Mozambique. That is Ethiopia. Name them. All I'm simply trying to say here, Mr. Leo, if Africa is going to emerge, the people we are complaining as our leaders are just about 3%. What we are doing, we are conducting an independent organization with our own policies to make sure that Africans can celebrate Africans, Africans can seek solidarity with Africans around the world to build Africa for Africans. What explains the fact that we have in Africa all the multinational companies? Do you understand that, Mr. Liu, that the West has crossed the level of speaking as an individual? If France speaks today, France speaks as EU. France speaks as a United Nations. They travel with governments. We travel as individuals. Africans travel in the Mediterranean Sea, go to Europe, come back to Africa with cars and containers. Why they come here with governments and carry gold and diamond, natural resources, and they build very repressive governments. This is what we are talking about. Who create them the safe passage for these raw materials to get to the port. So they understand the principle of what I call the 15% against 85%. And that is why it is very important that in the 60s, the event which took place in the 60s was done intentionally, as I began mentioning, from 1884 to 1885, when the leagues of the United Nations and the Berlin Conference, that they sat down to decide, solve their own internal issues, just to make sure that they keep Africa to where it is. 1923 we had the Leagues of Nations. 1929 we had the rise of the Vatican. 1944 we had the UNESCO. 1945 we had the emerge of the United Nations. The United Nations was built perpetually to keep Africa where it is, and that is what we talk about. Neo-colonialism is sponsored by Africans themselves, exploiting Africans at the expense of Africans, whereby the Africans are borrowing money. Mr. Liu, permit me to say this. Any African head of state that borrows money, whether from the IMF or from Paris Club or from the World Bank, is a big fool, because you are borrowing money from what they have extorted from your own people, and that is build an economy from the blood of your own ancestors, and that is what you are going to borrow for a man who depends on you, Mr. Liu.
Ebako, thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Liu, and to all in the studio. I'm Mr. Mbong, writing from Boya. I think the political leaders in Cameroon need true repentance and start consulting kingdom luminaries like Apostle Ambe to guide direction and rewrite the destiny of our darling African. Mr. Mbong, my good friend who used to, I don't know whether you are still with Express Union, good evening to you and family. You are watching us from Boya. Good evening, Mr. Liu and co-panelists. I strongly agree with Apostle Ambe points that colonization is not the problem of Africa, but the greediness of African leaders. Nkwanyu Clifford writing from Douala. So due to the mistake, okay, good evening, Mr. Ghana Miner from Uganda. Will you share your enterprise details like WhatsApp and Facebook page? I'm happy with your ideas. Dr. Luis is writing from Yaoundé. Can you just write me on WhatsApp? I will send you his number if you want to get to him. Good evening, Mr. Liu and the panelists of my media prime. The problem boils around self-centeredness and crave for power from our leaders, such a way that human life have become meaningless. God help us. Kepsu Cedric writing, Mr. Liu, I'm surprised to see you in my media prime TV. I used to follow you. Yes. Good evening, Mr. Liu. I love your program. I'm Andy. Are you writing from Limbe? Good evening to you. Now, no. Let me get to to Madam. Yes, it's Madam V. Tata. You listen to what Andrew Atemebako is saying. Many Africans think that we have been caged by the United Nations and others, but some people think that it is time for us to start talking differently and taking ourselves out of any yoke that we might have been placed under by those we call colonial masters.
Well, actually, he's right in some points, because I think Africa is not the only continent that was colonized. You know, and when you look at the other continents, you know, if you look at South Korea, you look at India and all the countries, they've tried to loosen the grip from the colonial masters, and they are developing their countries. So you ask yourself, what is missing in the African countries? And I think after the Europeans left, we didn't take the chance to decolonize our societies. And it has to start with education. The education that we give to our people is not the education that empowers them to develop their own country. You cannot be teaching university students literature, history, and you expect them to leave the university and create jobs for themselves. That's not going to function. So we have to decolonize our educational system to make sure that we produce young people that can develop their own countries, that they understand their own environment. And those are things. Those are some of the factors that are lacking in our communities. You know, so I'm always of the opinion that we need mental revolution in Africa. Africans need mental revolution, because when we attain it, we are going to kick out a lot of people out of our continent in order to develop our continent. You know, but it has to start with realizing where our problem lies, and our problems is us. The self-hatred, we have a lot of self-hatred in our societies. We have to start dealing with those issues. Nobody is going to deal with them. We have to start dealing with those issues, you know. So those are some of the factors that I think on personal level, we have a lot of responsibilities to carry. But on the national levels and on the regional level, when you look at the African Union cannot speak for Africans, because it is not financed by Africans. The African Union is being financed by the Europeans, by the United Nations. It's being financed by foreigners. So how can it speak for the interests of Africans? You know, so we are just being, we don't know how these things function, and we believe that they are there, you know, to save us. Nobody is going to save us. We have to save ourselves. Madam, you know, so that's the message.
Madam Veye, can we understand why the African continent cannot finance the African Union? This is just an organization, and we know the resources that we possess. We know the respective budgets that African countries actually are running under. How do we explain that, as rich as Africa is, we need to be financed? Our key instance, we're talking about the African Union needs to be financed from out of Africa. When there is a major crisis in Africa, we need the Europeans, please. We need the Europeans to come and assist us solve our problems. Is it that we don't have resources?
No, the first thing we have to do, and that's why I say we need mental revolution, is we have to take back our resources. The resources are being run by Europeans. We have to take them back, to nationalize our resources, our oil, our mines, and all those factors. That is the first step in mental revolution, and that's the first step in getting your independence. We cannot develop if our resources are being run by other people. How come we have resources and they are being run by other people? And we call ourselves independent? Sorry. A lot of African countries are not independent, and that's where we have to start to.
Okay, a lot of African countries are not independent. Apostle Lambe Valentine Ngwa, you religiously followed the delivery by Andrin Atemibako, who says that Europe functions as a body. We have the United Nations and a host of others, but Africa would want to trade with the world from individual perspective, that we have been divided along national lines, and that we cannot evolve as it is today because our hands are completely tied. That's what you said.
We are divided. Mr. Leo, let me address this issue from another perspective. Okay. We are talking leadership here in a generic sense. But there are three categories of leadership. There is a political class of leadership. There is a business class of leadership, and there's the academic class of the elites. These three categories of leadership in Africa, we are almost globalizing them, or trying to assemble them to be one. We do not only need politicians to cause a revolution in Africa. The business class can equally cause a revolution in Africa. If colonialism did not hold Aliko Dangote to become a multi-billionaire, I don't think colonialism can hold us from carrying out activities in this continent.
We have Amadou Babadan Pulo.
There are many. I don't want to cite. There are many. Given a few analysis on the different class of leadership, what about political leadership, the business leadership, and also the academic elites?
No, we are talking about religion. Africa today imports so much from the world because of religion now. We are not dominating yeah.
That's what I'm trying to let you understand, that if we are talking leadership, it would appear we are focusing only on political leadership. The person that negotiated the liberation of America from the hands of the British was Benjamin Franklin. He was a bookbinder in a printing press. He wasn't an academician. He was a little businessman. With his initiative, he negotiated France, and France came and they ousted Britain from America. That is not somebody who was in the political class. We are talking about liberation can come from any angle, because it would appear the liberation stuff is centered only in the hands of the head of states. Leadership can come from any angle. African leaders have gone to very high echelons. First and foremost, things like the Nobel Peace Prize was something that it was difficult for an African to have, until we have academic allies like Wole Soyinka, who came in 1986 and then won the Nobel Peace Prize in Literature, Wangari Maathai in 1994 from Kenya during the Great Revolution. I'm talking about people who can come from any angle. It doesn't take only African politicians to bring liberation in the continent of Africa. If Africa can have Dangotes and large Badampulo and other billionaires like 20 million or 30 million, because China is trying to raise 300 millionaires in the next 10 years. When a country is economically empowered, even the political class cannot make noise. Dangote influences presidents in Africa today because of the amount of economic wealth he possesses. We are talking about people booming the economy. Colonial masters cannot stop us from getting rich. If they were, that the billions and billions and hundreds of billionaires in Nigeria would have been stopped. That's the problem we're talking. There is Alex Onyema, the man who has Peace Air. He has about 30-something aircrafts. That's the man that trained America. And Nigeria is independent to a certain extent because of the amount of billionaires, people who can sponsor movements. Africa's economic backwardness is one of the major reasons why they are being dominated. Not the political flaws, not the political stagnation. That Aliko Dangote grew in this Africa. It didn't grow in space. Mo Ibrahim is a Sudanese British who is a multi-billionaire, and he empowers African presidents and gives them a reward of $5 million for good leadership. That's something that is being used to ginger. If we have strong economic leadership, we can influence the academic and the political sector. And I don't think the Europeans can hold anybody from being financially buoyant. If you come to Cameroon, you will see billionaires. Fosso Victor was there. He had no PhD. He was not a leader in the economic, the political class. Was he in the academic class? He was a leader in the business class.
Kaji de Fosso.
Kaji de Fosso. So if we are talking about leadership, if the political class has failed, what about the economic class? Those who are talking here, who colonize our economy also. These guys who go out of the country and they are setting businesses here and there, did they not see colonial masters in Africa? In South Africa right now, we have Valery Vezakov. He is the one that controls the diamond. That's a businessman that came into Central African Republic and saw what was there and then linked it back to the government. When Central Africa had a little problem, the president was interested in the country because a businessman came there to set up a structure. Gazprom is a Russian oil company in Africa. Luke Oil is the same thing in Russia. We have Total in Africa. We have Razer that construct roads. We have Root that construct roads. Those are state companies in different countries in Africa. How many African countries have state companies to manage affairs? You go to Nigeria in the civil engineering, it is Julius Berger that ties all the roads and carry all the structures there. It's a British company. Where are our own African companies that can stand and contest for road construction in Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, Brazzaville? All what we do is that we sit and make noise and eat government money. Cameroonians, Central Police, Nigerians, set up your own Gazprom, set up your own Total. Total goes to the extent of not only extracting oil. We have Perenco, we have Friedlander, we have Total. Those are French companies, not just extracting oil here, they equally process and retail in petrol stations called Total. Where is our own companies? People who have no economic backbone cannot influence political activities. That is the reason why in most countries, it's the businessmen that decide who is the president.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Liu, and the other members in the studio. Please, to begin with, I will start with the educational system in Africa. We need to introduce or to empower ourselves with vocational education. Prince Ivo Ego, writing from Yaoundé. I would like Mr. Ghana to come in after taking some messages. So let me just take 2 or 3. Good evening, Mr. Liu. It's Fon Elisha from Limbe. Africa leaders are just being selfishly, and we can't finance our resources. That is simply because we don't want to promote our own skills and potentials. This one says, okay, you're writing from Moyoka. Good evening to you. Good evening to all on Prime. Africa is poor because its former colonial powers want to keep it that way, not because of the choices of its leaders are making. Many conservatives, on the other hand, sweepingly see that corruption or bad governance are to blame without taking account of the obstacles many African countries face. Yet it is in looking at the detail of how otherwise similar countries have taken different paths that lessons can be learned. Ken is writing from Limbe. Good evening, Mr. Liu. I don't think we have leaders in Africa because what I see are middlemen between Africa and Europe. Okay, this is Leopards from Manyemen Hospital, Manfi Road, receiving aid from PCC partners. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Liu. This is Mr. Nji from Yaoundé. I'm so happy for the topic of today. I pray there should be a listening ear in Africa who can be a leader for the people, not a greedy politician. Mr. Ibako is speaking the truth. Good evening, Liu and crew. African problems is embezzlement, tribalism, corruption, civil wars, prolonged stay in power by their leaders, continuous loans from multinationals, lack of positive investment. The list is long. Only God can liberate us, the Africans. Emmanuel is writing from Boya. Good evening, Mr. Liu, and to all the panelists. Thank you for the topic of today on leadership in Africa. One thing I always ask myself this: do these leaders have conscience? And I came to conclude that most of them have sold a conscience. Cam Honorin is writing from Boya. Oops, very long message. Please, I like your program. It's very enriching. We really need to do a profound reforming of our mindsets, replacing it with African religious and communal mindset. It is a must. We really need a mental and conceptual decolonization. Achon Kwine, Ferdinand, writing from Yaoundé. Lots of messages from Yaoundé this evening. Good evening, Mr. Liu, and the wonderful cream of panelists are there on it. Again, poor leadership is as a result of too much dependence on the colonial masters and for the fact that the leaders want to embezzle. Thank God for electricity today. Daisy in Kumba. Good evening to you. Good evening to you, Mr. Liu. It's high time we stop seeing Europeans as saints in Africa, because during slavery, they didn't give us good education, good housing, good food, or good clothing. So what makes Africans think they gave us good religion? Botutu Olutu, writing from Edea. Now, Zebiba Destiny says, good evening, Mr. Liu. I think Africa is like this because Africa do not practice effective democracy. Good evening, Mr. Liu. There is no democracy in Africa, and I think that is the root cause of African problems. Clarkson from Limbe says, good evening, Mr. Liu. Why African is not developing is because African leadership is based on political appointments. Mr. Ghana, Minor out there, some people think raising the points that we need to have an overhauling, a rethinking of our system of education, an education that will make Africans to see themselves as solution providers and not consumers.
Thank you, Mr. Leo. Many countries have started to revive their education. Kenya has done it, Rwanda is doing well, South Africa, Namibia, Botswana. They started a system that after graduating, 90% of their students don't think even about working for the government. They don't have this idea now. They know that after graduation, they can start a business or they can create something. At least they want to be independent. Now, the difficulties we are having on those French colonized countries like Cameroon, Congo, Chad, the economical system, I was listening to our brother, Apostle Ambe Valentine. He need to understand that the economical system of those French, it cannot be suitable even to create a jobs. Number one. Number two, we have to understand that if a country is economically stable and growing, the politics is not in, politics will follow. If you see the country that people talk too much about politics, believe me, my brothers and sisters, people are poor, they don't have nothing to offer, they don't have nothing to do. If you go to any country and you see the younger generation talk about their leaders, about their whatever, about the economy, mean that something is wrong. Anybody who is doing well, don't worry about the government. Now, we have to understand that after doing the research development, we understand that many companies, like in French country like Cameroon, the company end up dying after 20 years because they are just a sole proprietorship. They are not public liabilities companies. The companies, our brothers Ambe is saying, this Force of Victor, or Kaji de Forso, or CCC, all those companies. How come a company who's running more than 20 years, but the company cannot account to 5,000 jobs in the country? Something is wrong. Why? Because we don't have a stock exchange that we can list those companies to raise the fund locally and to develop them. Aliko Dangote, he's calling in Nigeria, Micah Denuka, all those richest people in Nigeria, their companies are listed to a stock exchange that they are they have abilities to raise funds and to develop another countries. They can invest. When you see Aliko come to Cameroon to invest, he don't need any loan from the bank because he knows where to raise the funds. But we in Cameroon, we don't have it. I can assure you today, all those big Cameroonian companies, if the CEO die today, the company will die. We have more than 50 people, I can call the name in Cameroon, that after they are not alive, the company is completely gone. Because the company is not a PLC company, and it's just a family company. After when the son take over, he don't know how to manage it, and the company disappeared, and we are losing jobs. And we need now to find out what is the system, because if our economical system is strong, the politics will follow us. Yes. That's 100%. In America, it's the rich people dictate for America. It's not politicians.
That's what you said.
Politicians are just a puppet in America. Rich people give the rule, tell them what the country have to do because they are the one creating the jobs. But now in Africa here, we don't have one African company who have created more than 15,000 jobs except Dangote Group. Do we know in Cameroon who is a company who have 5,000 jobs? We don't have that.
No.
But only Aliko Dangote have more than 15,000. So the only things we need to do now, we as this generation, we need to try to study what is the new system of education we can put on the ground to make sure that we can have a system that those companies can grow. The more they grow, the more
the likes of Aliko Dangote can easily raise money, and that it is difficult for persons operating businesses in Cameroon to do same. What is the difference? How do you easily raise money in an economy like Nigeria than what obtains in Cameroon?
There is something they call Nigerian Stock Exchange. You can go, you see that Dangote Cement is listed, Dangote Flour is listed, and you, Mr. Leo, from here, you can call any bank in Nigeria to buy shares in the company. So, mean that if the company is doing well, people are buying shares. There's Safaricom in Kenya. When you go to Kenya Stock Exchange, you can buy the shares. So, mean that any company who has the ability to be listed in the stock exchange have easily can raise funds.
No.
But in Cameroon, if today Mr. Amadou Babadampulo want a new project, he have to go to the banks to raise money. So this is difficult. But if Cameroon have a stock exchange, and those Ndawarati, all the Kaji, the Fotso BA, all those companies, CCC Soap, and Soakam, if they are listed in Cameroon Stock Exchange, we as a population, we can buy shares on this company. And the more we buy shares, the more company will grow, the more we expand to another countries. That's right. Can you hear me?
How do we buy? Can you give us a typical example that, for example, if somebody wants to buy shares, how does it, or how do they even raise the funds? They decide to say people should just come and buy shares and it grows?
Stock exchange.
Mm.
Can you hear me, Mr. Leo?
Yes, I'm getting you.
So, the easiest way today, we in Cameroon, all the French countries, we need to create a stock exchange and we list those African companies there. And when we list them, we as African, even in diaspora or in Cameroon or in any country, we can buy shares. And the more we buy shares, the more the companies grow. And the more they grow, they expand and we can create jobs. And the more we create jobs, those younger generation will never focus to think about politics. If you see somebody who want to be a politician because he don't have nothing to do,
okay,
because it's the only way to get money now in our French countries. You have to be a liar, you have to be a politician. Someone like me who I have my company, why do you want me to be a politician? Do you think Aliko Dangote want to be president of Nigeria? He don't need that. It's just a stress.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we are talking about leadership in Africa that may have contributed to where we are today, but don't we also have a responsibility because they are leaders, because some of us chose them? We have very low political education, and many young people themselves are not interested in issues of politics. It is true that Mr. Ghana says that if we are economically empowered, we may not like to venture into politics, but that is where some key decisions are taken.
Mr. Leo, the first thing I will say about that issue is that when we talk about we are the ones maybe who are responsible for not electing the right people. The question is, do we really have elections in Africa? Because most of the times those who are sent to power through means that you cannot actually explain. And in that case, I can't actually blame the African youth for not being for not playing his part in choosing the right leader. Even at times when they do all they can, they end up actually stealing, let me use the word stealing their vote. So in this case, these young people get discouraged. And Mr. Leo, concerning what Mr. Ghana was saying there, when you look at it in a place like Cameroon, to be precise, let me be particular with Cameroon, it is practically difficult to raise a company and make money out of it. First, we have high taxes in Cameroon that discourages investment in Cameroon at a high level. And so a young man who is willing to make a difference wants to get engaged in business, the kind of the policies that were put in place when it comes to taxes is bad. And I think that there is need for such things to be revisited if they will encourage the youth to do what they need to do. I started by saying that it is necessary to also remember that each one of us share the blame, but I can't put it all on these young people, on us, the citizens, because if there is success somewhere, there is a possibility for it to be everywhere. But if you see that this success is lacking in most of these places, then there is a reason. And so what is that reason? I pointed out earlier, we have a problem of greed in Africa. Most of those who are sent to leadership, political leadership positions, are not going there because they want to lead the nations. Don't forget, most of the people we call political leaders were poor individuals in their communities and had the opportunity to access power. When they got there, they thought it was their farm, and so they turned it into a farming, and they started harvesting, and harvesting at the detriment of every other African. And that is one serious problem. So in this case, greed is actually working in that particular part. And furthermore, Leo, when you look at it, ask me the reason why a young African should go to the polls to vote. I will tell you, most of them will find it difficult. In fact, they'll be discouraged to go to the polls to vote, knowing very well that before they go for elections, it seems as if they already know who is going to win. And as long as that is the case, most of these young people get discouraged. And that's why you have voters' apathy in almost all African nations, precisely the French speaking nations. Most of these nations, they are discouraged, the youth are discouraged to get involved. And so I will not put that blame on the youth. I will put it on the political class, whom for their greedy reasons have done everything possible to destroy that political base. And like Mr. Ghana said at the start of this, we also have embraced a foreign culture, what we call democracy, thinking that is going to work in Africa. In fact, it was forced down our throats because no African leader was willing to implement that. During the days of independence, they were fighting, and most of them wanted to institute socialism as their system of governance. But look at it. They were forced with democracy, the so-called democracy that brings a system that completely destroys, and let me use the word, destroys communal life and uplifts individualism to an extent where the African person who before could live together with one another has become an enemy to the brother and sister. And so we are talking here. I will go back to insist that the real problem that we have at this particular moment is a value problem, is a cultural problem. And until those things, that's why I said there is need for an educational system that should be set up, which will revisit these areas, reinstitute the values that our ancestors had, to educate Africans to believe in Africa and to believe in themselves. You know, the whole idea of self-hate that we have today is not something that came from the air. It is not just popped into the hearts of Africans. It came through calculated means. The kind of education that our colonial, this time I blame the colonial master on that, brought to us. That education has corrupted the African person from within. And so I heard Apostle Ambe saying that, okay, if they succeeded here, yes, I buy that position. But there is also another issue we should understand. That if somebody, by virtue of wrong education, miseducation, has been corrupted to the fault, it is practically impossible for that person to just get up one day and step up and be great. No. That's why you have selected cases. There are few. There will always be exceptions. So we can't generalize the whole thing and say that everybody can be like that. No. And so there is need for us Africans to get to know that there is a problem with each one of us. And that problem is coming through the kind of education we had. And until that is completely abandoned, then a new one set up that will remind us of who we are.
Okay.
We will keep on living a life of a stranger, though we are Africans.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Good things to you all in the studio. Joining late, Brett from Dubai. Mr. Liu, I like what the man finance is saying about the stock exchange. I did finance in UB and doing capital market financing now to be certified. So even certified commercial banking and credit analyst, I will wish you to help me with his contact. In fact, I have been waiting for a financial talk like this. Please, can you just write to me after the program? I'll send you Mr. Ghana's number. Those who need the numbers, just get to me after the program. Naya Tower, writing from Tico, says, Naya Tower, with all due respect, the government, with all the immunity they have built, are in the position to determine the effectiveness of all the sectors in Cameroon. Cameroon government is the cause of raising revenue imposed the French system of economy, which is tax system of economy. How can we empire ourselves when the very government have become our own very enemy of progress? Okay. Good evening, Mr. Leo. Is Elias Mohammed writing from Bamenda. I want to say leadership are the cause of the problem today in Africa. Good evening to all in the studio. Africa, we need change. Our way of education, the colonial people make us to believe they are superior than Africans, which that is not. They make their money too powerful than us. For example, $500 is 250,000 francs. Okay. 2-star is writing from Boya. Good evening, Mr. Lord. Evening. This is my contribution to the topic of today. Is from Larissa, writing from Bamenda. Your contribution says that taxes are killing Africa. Good evening, Mr. Liu, and to everyone out there. The problem of poor leadership in Africa today is all about greed. African brothers don't have the interest of the common man. At heart, a country like ours, Cameroon, whose GDP is high, should not be suffering. Wane Oscar, writing from Limbe. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Lukong Report Nyudzenyuf, writing from Kishi in Kumbo. For Africa to succeed and to be independent, Africa needs to have its own currency, which is also made in Africa, and stop all the colonial masters with immediate effect. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Africa is not developed because bad leaders and bad colonists master. Mr. Bless, writing from Douala. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Nervis from Bonaberry. Africa would only change if we learn to change universities to polytechnics. Good evening, Mr. Leo. I'm so happy with such a topic. Africa's solution will come from decolonizing our educational system and religion. Education and religion are new colonial tools. Africa should decolonize education and religion. Please, I wish to participate when such topics come again. Enoch Sakwe, writing from Douala. Mr. Liu, colonization of Africa is different colonization of some Asian countries. Africa's biggest problem is the partitioning strategy implemented during the Berlin Conference. In the divide, we became enemies to ourselves because of the cultural conflicts that arose. Okay, Tiku Felix is writing from Boya. Now, it's religion to some extent the way it is practiced in Africa. Also, because we are talking about leadership, and he raised the issue of economic, cultural, and a host of others. Yes, how do we see religion? We have mega churches in Africa, mega men of God. They help. Why are you laughing now, Prof? Yes.
Mr. Liu, you know, a lot of Africans have been blinded to what religion is.
Okay.
Because in the best of my understanding, democracy is another religion, which the African people have not yet come to understand. Mm-hmm. And then we have also seen the effect and the damages in which religion has also, how will I put it, has also added into the poverty rate in Africa, where you cannot explain the fact where a country such, for example, as Cameroon is able in every 10 years to produce 10 million, between 7 to 8 million poor Cameroonians. You cannot explain the fact why the governments become the largest employer where the private sector does not even breathe. You cannot explain the fact why there's high taxes and the private sector or the people themselves or the Africans cannot find a need to see their own future in their own countries, where Africans live like foreigners in their own country. What explains that fact? What explains the fact that other nationals come here who do not even speak English nor French, they go back as billionaires, while the Africans themselves plunge themselves into abject poverty? Mr. Liu, there are certain things that we need to understand if we are going to really survive as a people. Because when we are looking at the youth population that may not be so much involved into politics, the youth have no blame here to be taken. The only blame here they have to receive is being responsible at this junction in bringing the kind of change that is going to reflect a better Africa for tomorrow. When we talk about trying to give other examples of other countries like Asia, we cannot compare Africa and Asia. Africa's story is different when it comes to the level of the colonialists. Why do you explain the fact that when Biden entered power, the first bill he passed was giving the Asian Americans full rights? The same LGBTs who went on the street, and for all the years the blacks have lived, our people have lived in the United States, their rights have never been given, even as we speak. So we have to understand that the case of Africa is different when it comes to the how will I put it, the continent or the international country-wide point of view. Africa, as a matter of fact, there is no African country that will say that it has even we have not even seen 1/3 of our Africa's potential. Anyone who has seen the movie of Wakanda, that is an idea of the ability and the potential that Africa carries. And we need to understand that at the juncture, Mr. Liu, where we are, it is true that democracy cannot be practiced in Africa for very obvious reasons. In a continent where 85 to 80% of its population lives in abject poverty, you don't expect those kind of people to go to the polls and vote, because their consciences, they have lost their sense of freedom and liberty. They are at the level of looking for what they can eat a day. That is the way they have reduced the African population. When it comes to democracy, it has been an abuse to the African society. When it was instituted in America, they had already built an economy using dictators. In Europe, they had built an economy using dictators at the expense of the African people. Today, why do you think, Mr. Liu, when this is what we talk about neo-colonialism? In the 60s, it was mandatory that Africa and its government must have democracy in its constitution. What led to the invasion in Libya? They said Mohammed Gaddafi was not respecting the constitution because he was building a system for himself which befits his people, and NATO went down with the help of Obama and bombed the hell out of Libya. That is, Libya today is being reborn at the level of the second Berlin Conference too, in Germany. So what are we saying? We cannot deny the fact that neo-colonialism is being sponsored by Africans who are compromising with the imperialists to exploit their own people and to support, to exercise their own tyranny, Mr. Liu, over those that are beneath them, to support the prices of those that are above. We must understand one thing here, Mr. Liu, that all men are born with honor. Honor is something that all men are born with. Okay. It cannot be granted to you and it cannot be taken away from you, but it must certainly not be lost. So here we call in for solidarity. We call in here for unity. We are calling in the mass population of the African youths who are yet to come to the realization that their future and their destiny is being exploited in the presence of these multinationals that are in Africa, Mr. Liu. We want a free Africa where the Africans themselves can have future in their own country. There is no need, Mr. Liu, to find Africans living Africa. Tell me, what does the West have that Africa does not have 1 million times than what the West has? What accounts the fact that Africans are living Africa? So we need the kind of leadership that are going to pass through the doors of the masses, and not those that have been appointed, and not those that have been influenced by the West in building very repressive governments.
We are out of time. Others have to speak. Good evening, Mr. Liu. I want to thank you and all panelists. I wish to add to what the last speaker said. A stock exchange market was created in Douala, but it's not functioning since its creation. Who are we to blame? Answer is the government. Mr. Liu, if I want to buy shares in MTN Cameroon, I have to go to South Africa Stock Exchange market. Likewise, Orange and other multinational companies based in Cameroon. With this France appointees president in Africa, we have to stand up as one man and take back Africa from the colonial masters. Pastor Derek is writing from Limbe. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Africa is not developed because of bad leaders and bad colonial masters. Okay. Good evening to you. No, I can't read that. Oops. Can't read some messages. I'll get back to you, Madame Veye Tata. This is going to be our last intervention. Africa Positive, what are the activities? What is the way out? How do you intend to mobilize Africans to regain their dignity and chart the way forward for the continent?
Well, as you know, we've started with the Ubuntu series because I think a lot of people don't read. That's something that we also have to acknowledge. Education is not only going to school, but it's also informing yourself, reading a lot and getting knowledge, general knowledge. So since a lot of our people watch videos, watch films, so we thought it's important that we channel this information of decolonizing our mindsets, decolonizing our societies, decolonizing our education through the Ubuntu series, so that they can watch it and maybe sensitize themselves. Because as Adrian said, you need to mobilize the masses. If the masses in Africa is decolonized, they are going to push away all these bad leaders that we have. But as long as the masses are not yet decolonized, they are not yet sensitized, that's why we keep on suffering. So we have to do a lot of sensitization, grassroots work, mobilization, to make sure that we give our people the right information so that they can bring about change that is needed in our society.
Okay, thank you very much, Madame Tata Veye. Apostle Lambi Valentine Ngwa. Africa is looking forward to good leadership and responsible citizens. How do we meet that objective?
Yes, Mr. Leo, from the 1960s where we got independence, we got people who began sensitizing Africans. Africans cannot be studying one thing for 60 years and they have not come to understand it. People like Malemo Kamaraki Nyerere were trained in Britain, Kwame Nkrumah were trained in Britain, Agostinho Antonio Neto were trained in Portugal, America Kakabra were trained in Portugal. All those guys, when they gave them the colonial education. But when they studied what was given to them and what they were seeing on ground, they thought they were raising their countrymen in black skin, not knowing that they were raising people to fight against them. You mean to tell me that Mwalimu Kamarake Nyerere, Julius Kwame Nkrumah, America Kakabra, Modibo Keita, Sekou Touré, Thomas Sankara, who rose and began sensitizing Africans since around the 60s and the 70s. At this level, Africans are not sensitive enough to have known that the education given to them is wrong. Are you telling me that all the education that Africans have been pumping through different platforms with this advanced technology age, where we have been educating people very fast and a rapid circulation of information, Africans have not come to consciousness? What will keep laying emphasis of the education that was given to us? It gives me a serious concern, because late in the 60s, where these guys were educated, they began rioting. They started nationalism. I think it's our approach. I was called by a Pan-African organization in America to give them a write-up on what I think should be the approach. I think that the approach we are supposed to use right now is not a nationalist mentality. It should be like the church that is operating in China, the underground church. They are doing evangelism, but the state does not know. I think that most of the people that came up like Steve Biko Bantu, E.W. Du Bois, Malcolm X, and the rest who stood as Pan-Africanists, they were too vocal. We should carry out underground expression, underground education of the Pan-Africanism in our system. Our approach is wrong, not the education.
Okay, we shouldn't
our approach
the
is
1960
wrong.
ways.
Yes,
because times have evolved.
Times have evolved, and this time around we have to take it in another dimension. We have to take a different approach, because why? The approach we use eliminated all our giants.
Okay.
So the approach is the problem, not the education. We should stop emphasizing education. People are well educated.
Yes. 1 minute and 1 minute for
Some will not see that part of education, but I'll always remind.
No, I've seen the part.
Education
I repeat it. I've seen that part of education, but people have been educated enough.
Please, 1 minute.
The education of the African person is not an education that will help the person to identify himself. And irrespective of the fact that we do have that idea that the education is not good, it depends also on what we want to put in that particular educational curriculum we are talking of building. It should not just be about struggling to form people. I will tell you, the success of a nation depends on its individual, on the people, the human resource. And that's why if you go to the UN actually measures the wealth of a nation by 3 words. You have those words, gross national productivity. Okay. And so unless an individual is productive, it is practically impossible for you to see a nation grow. So we need education, a system that can actually encourage and build capacity for people to come out.
Andrew Natim Bako, yeah.
When we talk about education, we need to know the kind of education that we need to bring out to the masses, which is very important, because if we say that we are educated enough, then it seems it's just like telling me that we should close all the churches. People go to church every day and hear the word of God, and they are still going there because there's a need for them to grow. What we are saying is that these masses that we are talking of, these people make about 90% of Africans' population, where about 3% are these leaders. Yeah. So it is very important, Mr. Leo, that at this junction, the approach that we are taking is different from the approach of the 60. The approach of the 60, these individuals stood up as one man. Today we are standing in as a people and not as individuals. So that's the difference, and that's the education that we are giving out, that Africa for Africans and only Africans can build Africa, and all the complaints can only stop when Africans come together.
Mr. Ghana Miner, how do we fast track our development drive?
Yes, sir. Mr. Leo, thank you so much. I was listening to the debate. When we talk about education, let's also congratulate ourselves, African. We are doing well. When we compare ourselves for 1960 today, we have done a lot of things, because if we spend all our time only blaming that we are not moving, that's not true. But we all know that in Africa, if you want to hide an African man in secret, put it in the book. We are not reading and we are not educating ourselves. Self-education is one of the best. The one we are receiving in school, for me, I'm just telling that it's not enough for us to develop Africa, because imagine someone come out after 17 years of spending his life, he come out with just a piece of paper, your surname, given name, date of birth, and they said he has been an excellent whatever. But the person don't have nothing to offer to the country. Do you know that 90% of our educated Africans, they are even liability to the government again? Because you don't have nothing to offer. Except you come out from a specific school that train you, that you have skill, that you have something to offer to the marketplace. You say, no, j'ai la licence en droit ou en sciences économiques, and you don't have nothing to offer. What are you going to do for the country? But if this guy come out is a very professional carpenter, he will more professional than you, because he can go to the terrain now and survive. But you, with your license and develop and draw, you will die with hunger. So mean this education.
Okay, Mr. Maina, thank you.
We need to go back and make sure that we train more our Africans to be productive in certain domain, that they can bring their contribution. Contribution matter.
Okay, thank you very much,
because if you don't have,
Mr.
what is the difference, Mr. Leo, between a CEO of the bank and the cleaner? All of them, they are same citizen.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ghana.
When you arrive in a company, you find out this.
Mr. Ghana, thank you for coming to participate in today's edition of the program.
Say again? I cannot hear you.
I said thank you for participating today.
Thank you, Mr. Leo.
And to you, Madam Tata, thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to discuss with such great minds.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Okay, you too, and thank you, Apostle Ambi Vantengwa.
Thank you, Mr. Liu.
Okay.
Africans have been learning for 60 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you to Mr. Liu, and to those who are watching us.
And also to you, Andrew Natime Bako. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Mr. Liu, and all the viewers.
Okay, we also want to thank you all who took time off to watch the program this evening. The production team, wonderful job. Desmond, Eli, and the broadcasters, and to you, Tabi, Tambe Bryant, supervising the work we do out here. Stay blessed. Bye-bye.